In this video, I'm going to share with you 7 truths, hard truths, but also key principles that if you apply, you can separate yourself from basically 99% of the world in even a single year. In a single year, applying these principles, your life will look fundamentally different. You will be in a different place. Your future self, a year from now, will be unrecognizable to you and to everyone around you. I can speak with truth to these principles because I've applied them many times throughout my life to achieve seemingly impossible goals. And one of the things I love about this concept is that there really is no such thing as impossible. That's just the limit you put upon yourself. In fact, research shows in decision-making and in constraint theory that seemingly impossible goals are actually a lot easier than possible goals. Or as Tim Ferriss would say, unrealistic goals are easier than realistic goals. One of the reasons being that unrealistic goals, first off, they can be reverse engineered and you start operating from the future rather than operating from your current assumptions. Second off, seemingly impossible goals are just based on your current ignorance. If you ask yourself, and this comes from the decision-making theorist, Dr. Alan Bernard, he talks about if you have some impossible goal, if you just ask yourself, what would need to be true? What conditions would need to be true in order for this to be possible? Your mind will actually start to create the conditions in which, actually, if that was true, then this would be a possibility. Then you start working on those conditions. Anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's go into principle number 1. If you apply these 7 to 10 concepts, you'll have a different identity. You'll have a different behavior. You'll be operating from and as your future self rather than from your current self. And even in 30 days from now, you'll be able to achieve more in the next 30 days than you did in the last 12 months. So let's start with principle number 1. Principle number 1 is the concept that your input shapes your outlook. And so you want to be highly strategic and very conscientious about what you let into your brain because, again, your input shapes your outlook. We are all subjective beings. We all have mental models of the world, and those mental models were conditioned through experiences, through the meanings that we had, and also just through the information and the education we have. One of the number 1 things you can do as a human in terms of your agency, you are an agentic being, you have a spirit, you have a consciousness, is to be very aware of what you let in, because whatever you let in shapes your model of the world. And we all see the world subjectively. None of us see it objectively. You see the world not as it is, but as you are. And so the information that you let in not only shapes your thoughts, your view of the world, it shapes your desires, your identity, and your goals. And as human beings, we all have an identity and we all have goals. We can't escape that. All of our goals are camped into one of 2 categories. Either we're trying to approach something we want or avoid something we don't. And most people's goals have been conditioned to them by their external environment, their peer group, their friends, their family. They're mostly trying to be accepted by their peers, and their goals are very similar to their peers. This is why you are the byproduct of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So you're going to be the same person in a year from now, except for the books you read, the information you consume, and the people you surround yourself with. So if you choose different people, if you choose different material, you're going to be a different person. So this is number 1, because without this, it doesn't matter all of the other steps you do. If you're continuing to consume low-level material, I'm talking social media, if you're continuing to consume news and other forms of low vibration, low-level energy, that's going to shape your worldview. It's going to shape your identity. It's going to shape your desires. It's going to shape your action. It's going to shape your motivation. So step number 1 is have a much higher standard and filter for the information you let in your brain. By the way, your standards and your filter are the same thing as your identity. Whatever you let in is going to shape your goals, your desires, your identity. Your identity is what you most believe about yourself, what you most believe about the world. It's the story you have for your past self, your present self, and your future self. It's also the goals that you're most committed to as a person. So you yourself right now are committed, heavily committed, fully committed to certain goals. You might not be aware of what those goals are, but there's actually a really great book that I recently read called Already Free. This is a book that breaks down the differences and kind of blends together Buddhism versus psychotherapy. And what it talks about is that ultimately we are all either unconsciously or consciously choosing the life we now have. We often resent our spouses, our kids, our job, our bosses, but we actually keep those things in our life so that we can keep our resentments because they're serving a purpose. And so you just have to realize that you are freely choosing right now the life you have. You're even freely choosing to watch this video. Everything about your life, you're actually freely choosing, even if you feel like you're not, and you're positioning yourself as the victim, you are actually getting the benefit of being the victim if that's the energy or the thing that you have. I've actually recently realized this, and I realize every time I get mad at my wife for something in my head, or I'm playing out these vicious thought loops, I'm freely choosing those thought loops, and I'm choosing to be in that model of a relationship with my wife so that I can keep those thought loops and maintain the story that I have. I'm freely choosing that. So we're all freely choosing the life we now have, and you are committed to something. You can know what you're committed to by observing your behavior. You can know what you're committed to by watching what you're going after. So if you're going to a certain job, you're committed to that. If you're maintaining certain relationships, you are committed to that. And so it's just a recognition that you are committed to something, and whatever you're most committed to, that is who you are as a person. And as human beings, as we consume new and better information, we can start to commit to new and better concepts, new and better ideas. We can also uncommit to things that no longer serve us, stories that no longer serve us, identities that no longer serve us, behaviors, actions, people that no longer serve us. So principle number one, if you want to achieve more in 1 year than most people do in a lifetime, is weed out at least 80% of what you're now consuming. 80% of what you're consuming right now, using the 80-20 principle, would be stuff that's actually, I would say, either neutral or negatively impacting your identity, your mental models, your vision, your goals, your motivation, your energy. It is absolutely true that information, words, teachings have a more powerful effect on human beings than even weapons of war. This could be true of the Word of God, studying the Word of God. There's a scripture that says that the Word of God has more of an impact on the minds of man than the sword, in terms of like, it's more compelling. It's just very true that as human beings, information and the energy, the emotions behind the information are very impactful. They can be very motivating. I can say this from truth. I remember a couple months ago, I was out walking in my neighborhood and I was listening to a book. The book was called Go for No, which is a book I would recommend, by the way. And it had such a powerful effect, not only on my mind, but on my spirit, on my emotions, that it compelled me to various actions. It compelled me to take bold actions that I'd been procrastinating for a few years. And I became willing to approach, because again, all goals are approach or avoid. I had been avoiding something for a few years. And by being in the right frame of mind, there's a whole concept of set and setting. You need the right mindset. You need to be in the right environment. By being out walking in the morning, by listening to this book, I was in the right set and setting. I had the right set, meaning the right mindset. I was very open and willing to have my mindset shifted. I was listening, I was eager, and I was very intrigued. I was curious about what I was studying in that book, and it hit me with such force. And that's something that you can do for set and setting, is obviously pray for openness. If you're a person of prayer, pray for openness to new ideas. From a personality standpoint, openness to new ideas is a very powerful concept. If you're not open to new ideas, you're locked in. You've got a fixed mindset. You're not going to transform very quickly. But I was praying for openness, praying for inspiration, and I was seeking to be transformed. By simply listening to that book, it acted with huge force upon me and compelled me to action. And I went with boldness. And rather than being an avoidance-based person towards something I was afraid, I went full on approach, and my commitment led to courage. And courage is the starting point of all transformation. And courage is basically the action point of commitment. You can build up to commitment, but once you get to courage, it becomes a point of no return, where you now are willing to act with boldness, and you're willing to face the consequences of whatever's on the other side of your action. You're willing to pay the price. You're willing to accept rejection or learning, and you're committed. You're definite. Again, principle number one, choose better inputs, choose incredible inputs, and weed out almost everything that's low level, because your mind is in a lot of ways like it's a system. And according to systems theory, when you change a part, you change the whole. The butterfly effect, a little thing over here can ultimately create a tornado over here. And so letting little things into your mind over time can consume the system and change it for better or for worse. So in 2023, if you commit to more and better of the right information that transforms your thinking, engages your future self, leads you to motivation, action, and approach orientation, and rewires how you strategically go about your life and your goals, you can educate yourself. This is what's brilliant and amazing about human beings, and it's something I've seen and learned. We are very transformable. We are susceptible to learning. I've watched my mental models changed. I've watched over and over as I've read, studied, learned things, that the way in which I see the world and the way in which I act, the way in which I see myself changes. It's amazing how trainable human beings are and how educatable we are. We really can be changed, especially if we're open to it. You can learn mindsets and strategies for how to overcome traumas of your past, how to approach, how to create amazing relationships, how to build wealth, how to come unto God. You can learn anything if you're willing to learn. And learning is the ultimate superpower. And whatever you choose to learn, the quality of what you choose to learn is going to determine who you become. So that's principle number one. Your input shapes your outlook. Choose much better inputs, weed out inputs that are of no use to your future self or are ultimately shaping in you a weak mindset, weak motivation, a herd mentality. Principle number 2 is to think 10 times bigger. As human beings, we are all the product of what we're going for. Your goal shapes your process. There's a great poem that I love. It says basically something like, I asked for life a penny and it gave me nothing more. If I had asked for $1 million, life would have given me that. It's something like that. Basically, it's the idea that life will give you what you ask for, whether it's a penny, $1 million, $10 million. And it's no more difficult to go for 1 million versus 10 million versus 100 million. Ultimately, whatever you're going for is going to shape your vision, your process, and what you go for. So why not go for big? Because it's not actually any harder, and life will give you what you ask for. You become what you seek, you find, what you seek, you become. This is a concept called fitness function, that we are all optimizing ourselves for whatever it is we've decided can be ours. There are 2 time frames. Obviously, you can have a longer term time frame and a shorter term time frame. I would say for a longer term time frame, if you're going to put your head down, do a lot of deep work, be very focused and committed, 12 to 24 months is a very beautiful time frame to transform your life. You can think enormously big and you can start thinking non-linearly. What I mean by non-linearly is you get to play your own game. It's just between you and you. There is no external competition. Don't worry about what other people have achieved. I remember when I first started blogging in 2015. This was during the first year of my PhD program, and I really wanted to be a professional author quickly. I was told by literary agents and other authors that this would probably take me 5 to 10 years. I didn't like that idea. I wanted to do it in about 1 or 2. I love the quote from Peter Thiel. He said, take your 10-year plan and ask yourself, why can I not achieve this in 6 months? Not everything can be achieved that fast, but I love the concept when you're committed, basically you will find the way. Without commitment, there is no invention. Necessity is the mother of invention. And so for your 12 to 24 month time frame, I invite you to think in terms of impossible goals, unrealistic goals. What could you achieve in 12 to 24 months if you were locked in, lasered, and being as your future self? Being from your future self, acting as your future self, not as your current self, operating from the assumed future. There's a great quote from Neville Goddard. He said, assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled. Similarly, Florence Shin said, faith knows it has already received and acts accordingly. Faith is essentially the commitment, the conversion, the desire, but the definiteness of that what you want is already yours, and you're assuming the feeling of your wish fulfilled. You're walking forward and figuring it out and adapting and figuring it out, but you have to have that definiteness, that commitment of purpose. One thing about this that I think is very interesting is that one of the reasons people are afraid to set goals, it's this weird ego that people have, ego with themselves and ego with other people, is that people think that if they set goals and then don't achieve them, they're a loser. The reason to set goals is not necessarily to achieve them. The achievement of the goal, frankly, doesn't matter. Whether you achieve the goal or not, the goal is actually a tool for driving directed action, energy, motivation, and action and identity. So when you think about a 12 to 24 month goal, I want you to think in terms of seemingly impossible, that if you put your head down and if you essentially disappeared to everyone around you, and I'm going to go into a different principle on that in a few principles, but if you just locked in and lasered in and were in flow and focus and just weeded out 80% of your life, which is a distraction, all the things that are holding you back, the self-sabotage, the distraction, the low-level media, and if you just lasered in, what could be possible? What could be possible for you, which it doesn't matter what anyone else can do. I actually know, and I believe, and I've seen this, that if you sit down and laser in on a seemingly impossible goal for a 12 to 24 month time period, and by the way, this is a key principle of visualization, which is also one I'm going to go into in a minute. There's a few different styles or models for visualization. One is broad visualization about your bigger picture future self, which is helpful. A lot of research shows that you want to have a connection to and a vividness of your future self, but it's a lot more powerful to contextualize your future self and to see your future self at a specific time point, specific time frame, and in a specific position. So you can think about yourself in 12 to 24 months as your future self and being at a certain place, having gone through a certain hero's journey, transformation, and arriving at a certain destination, having achieved something, created something, and gotten somewhere. So as an example with me, just being blunt and honest, and this is another key aspect, is to not be so dogmatic about your vision of your future self. In 2, 3, 4 months from now, as you're making progress, as you're learning, you're going to have an expanded vision. And so you can then dial down a better, clear, different version of your future self. You want to be flexible, adaptive, iterative about this. But just to give you an example, One of the things that I'm going to be doing in 2023 is resetting or potentially renegotiating my relationship with my publisher. I want to set it up so that I have a lot more flexibility of writing at the velocity and the volume I want, because one of the things that I want to do in the next 24 months, and I have a 24-month timeline because of other visions I have for my future self. In the next 24 months, I want to write a volume of epically inspired books that then ultimately over decades reach tens of millions of people and essentially fund my future self for the rest of my life. I know I can do that, especially if I put my head down and if I go into flow and if I'm operating from my future self and if I'm operating from faith and if I'm not competing with anyone else and if I'm not worrying about it. So I'm basically just talking. So basically what I'm talking to you about is thinking 10x bigger and thinking on different timeframes. One would be a 12 to 24 month timeframe. Another one, though, could be a 30-day timeframe that in a single month, so call it January of 2023, what could you accomplish? I am confident, I believe, that you could achieve as much progress in January with the right mindset, with the right strategy. And if you're operating from your future rather than operating from your present, you can achieve just as much progress. There's a difference between busyness and progress. Productivity means you're actually making tangible progress in a desired direction. You can be busy doing a lot of volume activity without making desired progress. A lot of people are busy on a hamster wheel and they're not ultimately getting anywhere. So you're being productive if you're genuinely making desired progress in a desired direction. And the direction is chosen by you as an agentic being. We all have agency. We all have goals and desires. And that's what makes us who we are, is what we choose to want and what we choose to go after and what we choose to commit ourselves to. That's the difference between you and me. And the more conscious you become as a human being, the more you yourself can choose the inputs that shape you, but also the more you can choose for yourself what you want, what you believe is worthwhile, what you value, and ultimately who you're going to be and what you're going to do with your life and the impact you're going to have or lack thereof. The more conscious you become, the more your desires become trainable by you. They can become inspired by God. And so in a 30-day time frame, thinking 10x bigger, how could you achieve as much in the next 30 days as you did in the last 12 months in terms of desired progress in specific metrics? One other key aspect of this is that what you measure will improve. This is, I believe, called Pearson's law, that by just simply measuring something regularly, whether that's your weight, whether that's your income, whether that's X, Y, or Z, what you measure will improve just simply by the fact that you're measuring it, but also having a certain target. This goes back to goals and what most people have wrong with goals. And it's something that I am grateful, actually, that Dan Sullivan and I wrote this book on the gap and the gain, is that having a target that you're going for doesn't mean that you're going to be happy once you hit the target. That's one of the false assumptions of human beings, is that they think that they can't be happy until they hit the target. That then leads to being unhappy once you hit it because now the target changes, or happy or unhappy if you don't hit it because now you feel like a loser or a failure. That's the ego side, where you're egotistical towards yourself or egotistical towards the goal or towards other people, worrying about what other people think. It does not matter if you hit the target. You can eventually get to the point where you can exceed the targets pretty easily. But the target is simply a tool for transforming your strategy, your mindset, your identity, and your action. So thinking in terms of a short sprint, and this is how you can be both the tortoise and the hare, is that you want to have short timelines, call it a 30-day timeline with a seemingly impossible goal that you're sprinting towards, that is transforming your action and who you're being and what you're doing. So that in 30 days from now, whether you hit the target or not, you're in a fundamentally different place. And then you can look back, you can measure your progress, you can assess your progress. This is what being in the gain is all about. Being in the gain, by the way, is you're measuring yourself only against your past self. You're not competing against anyone else. You're not worried about whether you hit the target or not. You're just evaluating your own progress. And the more you do this, you develop what psychologists would call intrinsic motivation. And also you get into what would be called the infinite game versus the finite world, where now you're just playing your own games. You're intrinsically motivated. You're no longer comparing or competing externally, and you're not actually really that worried about what other people are doing. You're now just playing your own game and seeing how far you can go and how much you can transform and how much you can do. Principle number 2 is think 10x bigger and use short and long-term timeframes. In terms of long-term timeframes, what could you do in 12 to 24 months if you put your head down and essentially disappeared? By disappeared, I mean disappeared to most people, and I might go into that principle in a little bit. But if you actually got deep into flow and got hyper committed and focused, what could you do in 12 to 24 months? I'm confident that what you could do in 12 to 24 months would seemingly be impossible. And I've done it before, and I'm going to do it again in a different manner. And you get to set the fitness function. The fitness function is, what is the ultimate outcome that you want? What is it that you're optimizing yourself for? And you get to decide that as a human being. And I'm excited for what I'm going to optimize myself for the next 12 to 24 months. And it's going to be ridiculous for those who see it on the outside. But mostly, I don't really care about that, because for me, it's about me playing my own game and seeing what I can do for myself, and in my communion, in my relationship with God, what I can do through faith, commitment, action, inspiration, and just watching. Mental creation precedes physical creation, as Stephen Covey would say. So long-term time frame, 12 to 24 months. What could you achieve? Seemingly impossible. Separates yourself. Do things that fundamentally seem impossible. Then short-term timeframes, and this is how you would visualize your future self, is at both of these different timeframes. And the 30-day sprint would be basically seeing what you could do, which would be ridiculous in a 30-day time frame, which would probably be equivalent or more to what you even achieved in the last 12 months. And a lot of that progress, again, productivity is about progress, is about renegotiating situations in your life, renegotiating what you say yes to and what you say no to, letting go of certain things that no longer serve your future self, but also with deep focus, flow, with courage, with commitment, what could be possible in even a 30-day situation. Principle number 3 is one that some people may be uncomfortable with, but it's something that I know is a powerful principle, a powerful concept, and that is praying with faith. It's actually developing a relationship with God, praying with faith, and seeking God's help. There's multiple scriptures on this concept. One is ask and you shall receive. And another one is a principle that's talking about parenting. It's a scripture that talks about parenting. And it says, talking about parents, that if your child asks for a fish, would you give them a stone? It then says, if you being evil, or you being kind of mortal, can give good things to your children, why couldn't God or your heavenly Father give you brilliant things if you ask him? So what I have found in my life is that by asking God for help, he does help me, whether that's asking to be patient with my kids, asking to have a great workout before I work out, asking for inspiration while I'm writing in my journal, asking that I can be in a flow state while I film this video, asking that I can, achieve a goal, or that a door is open that I'm not currently aware of. It's simply the power of asking and learning how to receive. And over time, you'll learn how to ask and receive for better things. But God works with us at the level we're at, and he's happy to work with us. I believe that God is happy when we ask for his help, ask for his guidance, even if we're asking for things that are of no eternal value. We're asking and we're seeking his help. He will work with us along that way. And by asking for help and asking for inspiration, we can get it. I've seen that even at night when I'm going to bed, when I'm praying at night, getting ready to visualize my future self the next day, giving a request to my subconscious, as Thomas Edison would say, praying that I can wake up tomorrow, be in a flow state, be committed, praying and asking for God's help. There's no downside to it. And there's lots of upside if you become open to it. God will help. And from my standpoint, he loves every single human on this planet. I love the concept of human agency, that sometimes God doesn't work with us simply because we're not working on something ourselves. There's another concept as far as being anxiously engaged in a good cause, just having something constructive you want to do, whether that's build a house, build a building, build an orphanage, write a book, get a degree. There's a lot of good things you can do. And if you have a goal, something that's useful, constructive, worthwhile, and you're asking for God's help on it, he will then involve himself a lot more in your life. He'll open you up to new opportunities, new potentials, maybe even new goals, but he'll also help you succeed in what you're trying to succeed at. And I've seen that. I would never want to go through life without involving God in my goals. Not only does God reshape and expand my vision for what would be better than what I currently want for myself, but also involving God in the details, in the daily, day-to-day, trying to be good in my profession, trying to be good as a human being. Just by simply engaging God, seeking his help, I see it all over the place. And also seeking nonlinear miracles and incredible doors. I see it. And even in big ways, if I'm launching a book, and once, I love the concept of necessity is the mother of invention. Once the human mind is in a place where it really needs help, that's often also the position when people turn to God. Even in a lot of ways, the atheist, when they're in a position where there's nowhere else to turn, sometimes that's when they turn to God. Nothing wrong with that. When you're in that position of necessity, you become open to divine inspiration. You become open to new concepts. And I've been in that position. I even proactively put myself in that position where it's like, I really need a miracle. I need help right now. And I see it happen. I see doorways open. I see floodgates open. I see miracles happen. So involving God in your 2023 is an obvious way to make the impossible possible. Getting more help, getting more inspiration, getting more guidance, getting more revelation, getting more miracles. Why wouldn't you want to include that in your life? There's a lot of research that shows that people of faith are happier, they're healthier, they're more successful than people who don't. Like, there's just a lot of research. There's a stack of research on the difference between people with faith in God and people who don't. And if you're a person who's struggling on this concept, I'm not saying any of this to be preachy. I'm just saying it's something that's helped me. And I'm sharing principles that have helped me, principles that I have experienced, principles that I utilize that I know are true. Principle number 4 is going into monk mode. This is something that Greg McKeown talks about in Essentialism. Monk mode is the idea of disappearing and being unaccessible. So Greg McKeown talked about how when he was writing the book Essentialism, and this is a very true principle, it's something that I've seen a lot lately as well, is when you commit to something big and you go into the cave mode, you go into monk mode where you're just totally in flow, totally in focus, and you're mostly unreachable to the outside world. You stop being so reachable, you stop being so visual. Maybe you're stop being so posty on social media. Like, you're actually just in the cave, you're focusing, you're creating, you're doing something of tangible worth for 3, 6, 12 months. I think about James Clear, the author. He spent 3 years writing the book Atomic Habits. He went into monk mode. He essentially disappeared. He let his assistant continue posting on social media for him, but he stopped writing blog posts and stuff like that. He went into monk mode. He wrote that book. He emerged. He put it out. And so monk mode is a principle you can apply to your 12 to 24 month objectives, that you essentially disappear to most of the outside world and you get to work. You go into deep focus, cave mode, and you really create. You actually do something. And it doesn't mean you have to be absent to the world, but you disappear to a lot of the outside world. You stop being so reachable. You have higher filters around you. I remember in the book Essentialism, Greg McKeown talks about having email autoresponder where it literally said, I'm writing my book, I'm in monk mode, I'll get back to you in like 3 to 6 months, I'm sorry. And this is part of making a decision, is cutting off alternative options and being open to opportunity costs. And so as you're thinking about your 12 to 24 month seemingly impossible 10x visions and goals, if you go into monk mode, go into deep flow, and you're just playing your own game, holy cow, what can you achieve? This is what I'm committed to doing. I'm committed to going in the cave, going into monk mode, being in flow, and creating a volume of amazing work that would be seemingly impossible to outside sources, but who cares? I'm not playing other people's games. And I also know that given the world we're in, given the world of social media and constant inputs, 99.9% of people are far more distracted. They're in far less flow and they're far less committed towards exciting, seemingly impossible future self goals. Again, that doesn't really matter. It's just a reality of the situation. And so if you can block all that noise out, all that noise, and focus on the signal and go into monk mode and sprint towards your 30-day future self, but also your 12 to 24 months. In 12 to 24 months, if you go into monk mode, if you're in deep focus, deep flow, deep commitment, if you're choosing better inputs, if you're praying and seeking God's help, if that's something you want to do, which I love doing, you can do things in a 12 to 24 month period of time that pay you for the rest of your life, that give dividends for the rest of your life, that position you fundamentally different for the rest of your life. Let me give one example for myself. So I've gone into monk mode many different times. I actually served a 2-year church mission. That was a full-on monk mode. Like, literally, I was unavailable to pretty much anyone. And that was just full-on doing church and humanitarian service. I was fully absorbed in that. And it was the most transformational experience of my life. But I went into monk mode when I wanted to get into a prestigious college, or when I wanted to get into a PhD program. I went into monk mode for a few years, writing blog posts on medium.com when I wanted to become a professional author for about 2-year period of time. From mid 2015 to 2017, I wrote about 200 or 300 blog posts. Those were read by over 100 million people. By going into that monk mode, by just focusing, by being in flow, I was able to grow a huge email list and start getting 6-figure book deals and became a professional author. And I'm still benefiting and will always benefit from those 2 years of monk mode writing those blog posts. But now I'm going into monk mode again for another 2-year period of time. And I know that I'm going to level up, go 10x to where I'm at now. And then for the rest of my life, I will benefit and be paid for these 2 years of monk mode. And I will be in a fundamentally different position. And so if you went into monk mode, and if you just went deep into focus, if you stopped being so available to those around you, stopped being so distracted, what could be possible? Principle number 5, we've mostly gone into, which is visualizing your future self at different time frames. Visualizing your future self creating energy with your future self. I like visualization when I'm in the act of moving. So if I'm listening to a great book, if I'm working out at the gym, and you can use positive words, in terms of speaking out loud, praying while you're walking, talking, writing in your journal. But it's really about developing a relationship with your future self, visualizing your future self, seeing your future self, writing it down, having external reminders, external cues or triggers, transformational triggers, writing down, call it your 12-month goals, taping them to your mirror on your window. But like, it's just about developing the identity of your future self and seeing it at different time frames and being in a constant flow with yourself, with your future self, with God, and you just get into this insane dialogue and you start to have really powerful energy and you start acting and being as your future self. And again, there's different models for visualization, but I think the key ones are visualize your bigger picture future self and just accept the fact that what you want can be yours and that you're worthy of that. Your unconscious will only allow you to have what you believe you deserve, is what David Hawkins said. And often people don't get what they want because they don't believe they deserve it. They don't believe they're worthy of it. And the truth is that we're all human. None of us are perfect. And so why not you? It's just that question, why not you? Why can't you have that? If you choose it, if you commit to it, if you desire it, and if you get definite about it, once you get committed, then the universe conspires. Once you get committed, all sorts of things happen. Necessity is the mother of invention. So it's okay for you to commit to that, to want it, to go for it, and that you are worthy of it and getting to the place where you just accept it. It's okay that you can have this, you can become this, you can do this, especially if it's good, if it's noble, if it's worthwhile. I love the definition. This is kind of a core definition of courage in the psychological literature, but it's the commitment to a noble and worthwhile goal that involves some form of risk. It's your volitional, intentional action towards something that you deem worthwhile and noble that involves risk. And so you can commit to something. You can be anxiously engaged in a good cause. You can go for something that you want. And maybe in the future, you'll want something different and maybe even better. Commit to it, want it, and know that you can have it. And so visualizing your bigger picture future self is big, but also then, as I've said, visualize yourself at certain milestones. So that could be your 12 to 24 month milestone, seeing yourself at a certain destination, finishing that marathon, having that business, selling that business, whatever it is, getting married, like whatever, seeing yourself there and then operating towards that, but then shorter term milestones. But then even on a nightly basis, at night, this is something that Michael Phelps and others do, nightly visualization of who you will be. So you're wanting to visualize yourself at certain milestones and certain outcomes, but also visualizing yourself being in the process. So visualizing yourself the next day, waking up, committing to being in flow and being and doing what you want to be doing and committing to that, going to sleep, letting your subconscious work on that, and then waking up and fulfilling that commitment. As you make commitments and fulfill those commitments to yourself, you build integrity and confidence, which then gives you moral authority to yourself, but moral authority to other people. It's just practicing the principle of visualization and letting mental creation precede physical creation. When you build a house, you have to create the blueprint first. And so it's getting better and better at creating the blueprint in your mind of where you want to be the next day, who you want to be the next day, but also where you want to be in 30 days, 60 days, a year and a half, and becoming the architect, the mental creator, the conscious creator of who you are. I recently read David Goggins' new book. I think it's called Never Finished. And he talks about how the majority of what he does is visualization practice, seeing himself do and achieve impossible things, but also seeing himself be at certain destinations. Call it, he finishes his next book, he's speaking on stage with the president, whatever it may be. He sees himself in certain situations, he visualizes it, and then he bees and becomes that person. And a big concept in psychology is called psychological flexibility, which is a lot of it has to do with your identity, seeing yourself in that place, but then dealing with the emotions and the emotional resistance of going through the process of being that person, because you will have resistance emotionally to doing things that are difficult, but you can become flexible by not being absorbed by your emotions, by acknowledging them and by passing through them because of your commitment. Actually, psychological flexibility is kind of a cornerstone concept of what's called acceptance and commitment therapy, accepting your emotions as they are, but then moving forward towards valued goals in a committed way, irrespective of what you feel in the moment. And you become increasingly flexible along the way. You stop letting your emotions dictate you, and you become increasingly flexible and committed. And commitment is the key. The final principle I'll say here is continuously give yourself space to think, space to journal, space to learn. Give yourself space where you're not constantly jumping to the next low-level input. It's interesting when you're driving on the roads these days, if you hit a stoplight, you look over at the next person. Once people hit a stoplight, once they have any form of space, even 30 seconds, they have to fill it with some form of input or distraction. If you're in line at the grocery store, you got to fill it. So it's better to give yourself space, to slow time down, to not be in such a hurry. As ironic as that sounds, you can go very far and very fast by slowing yourself down, by not being in such a rush, and by giving yourself time to think, time to meditate, time to pray, time to strategize, time to have important conversations with other people, time to have conversations with yourself. All progress starts by telling the truth. Time to learn. If you're giving yourself good chunks of time, call it 1, 2, 3, however much time you're willing to give yourself in a day that you create, where you replace low quality consumption with creative, strategic thinking, openness, and maybe also high quality inputs where you're working in your journal, where you're working on your future self, but also where you're taking bold action towards your future self, but giving yourself space to think, space to strategize, space to be open, space to pray, space to meditate, space to learn, space to rethink things, space to look honestly at your life, at the situation you've created for yourself, at what could be readjusted, what could be changed. A morning of good thinking and inspired thinking can change the direction of your life. And I have this occasion regularly where I'm in the morning, I'm in my journal, I've put myself in the set and setting to be open, and I get a thought, an insight that alters my goals, it alters my direction, it alters my trajectory. And I have that regularly, and it's very powerful. And if you're not giving yourself the space, you're not going to get that inspiration. You're not going to get that power. So give yourself space regularly so that you can be shifted, so that you can be honest, be critical about your life, renegotiate it, resituate it, let go of certain things. Giving yourself the space transforms you. And just as a simple concept, if you're not focused on something, your brain's not transforming a lot. So when you're watching a video like this, for example, your brain will change, your mind will change, your identity will change, your goals will change to the extent that you're focused, to the extent you're truly learning. If you're listening to a book or truly learning, you will transform. I hope that helped. My name is Dr. Benjamin Hardy. Cheers to your future self. Cheers to 2023. Please like this video. Please subscribe. Have an amazing day.